All right, it's the Lex and Pete show. We are back. We are here to talk about Mock Draft 1.0. It's Pete's big return, but we'll get into all of that after a word from our sponsors. As always, we are brought to you by Sundog Multimedia. Sundog is an online communication and social media company. What started as a personal tool has since evolved into something much bigger, allowing users to communicate, research, and discover things that impact their lives and daily decisions. Sundog will collaborate with you to build and execute a modern yet nimble social media strategy by utilizing innovative and traditional media principles. Sundog is also a proud supporter of the Stop Soldier Suicide Foundation. You can follow Sundog on Instagram at Sundog_multimedia. That's Instagram at Sundog_multimedia. Easy peasy moving and service. Brains, bronze, and true professionalism. That's easy peasy moving and service. Muscle for hire, moving, assembly, errands, you name it. They will do it. Easy peasy is a multi-service team. If you need something, just ask. I have not submitted at the time that this video is released to the public. My blog for Mock Draft 1.0 will also be released. I'm going to try and release those at the same time, link the video in the blog. But you have already read my mock draft. I sent you the draft. You've taken your notes, and I think we'll just go over it. I don't think it's necessarily going to be pick by pick. I think that maybe, especially, your picks at the beginning, we can kind of group together. We can kind of look at things in tiers a little bit, but we'll get into that in a second. Of course, I think the big news is that it is your grand return to the show. So the floor is yours for any statements that you want to make.
Yeah. So first of all, it feels good to be back. I mean, back in front of the camera, Malik sweatshirt on, haven't had a reason to wear it since. But there's no doubt the leave was necessary. It came to my attention. It was brought to my attention rather forcibly that the leave was necessary. I strayed away from what made my content enjoyable at Friends Who Gamble Media. And I need to find my way back. So took the leave, necessary leave, listened to the feedback. In a nutshell, the feedback was I dove too deep into this trolling personality, firing off takes just to get a rise out of someone, and then acting like I was ready to die on that hill. Die on that hill no matter what about it. The famous case last year was obviously George not setting that quarterback, not having a quarterback when he had two on the bye week between his two guys. So things like that. That's what strayed me off the path. Felt like I dove too deep in the trolling, firing off takes, ready to die on these hills that I really didn't care about. And then it kind of discredited my takes that actually were probably good takes that I could have been right about, but it discredited my word on Friends Who Gamble Media and what I bring to this show. So took the time off. Credit to UKB for holding it down. Show every week. Didn't miss a beat. Kept it rolling. We die with the show. You put out an epi every week. Love to see that. And I'd say, hey, 2023 Pete is back with everything you loved and nothing what you hated for now. We'll see. Can relapse, but hey, I'm conscious of it. Positive attitude. Not going to be that troll firing off whatever he wants to say anymore. And like I've always said, I love it at Friends Who Gamble Media. I love what we do. It's good to be back. It isn't always will be. The league.
Very well said. I don't really have anything to add there. I think you kind of just said what needs to be said, and I think what a lot of people were thinking to begin with. I would say, when it comes to the takes, quality over quantity, but I think that there's a middle ground that can be found. I don't think that you have to necessarily dial it back. I think that you can fire from the hip, but I think it's something that we've talked about where just coming and not just making takes for the sake of making them. You can fire off as many takes as you want, but sometimes it's just better to come with a better constructed argument. And I think that you've put a lot of thought into that, and I'm looking forward to this next season and the things that we can certainly accomplish on this show. So I think we can move past that. I think that a lot of it's been handled offline. I think people are happy to have you back. I think people are happy to see us back together. So I think that it's pretty appropriate that our first episode back is for Mock Draft 1.0. This is my second draft that I've dropped. I'm trying to decide if I want to. I'm definitely going to link it in the blog, but I don't know if I should do former pick and maybe each mock draft I say all right, and 0.0, I had them taking this guy, and 1.0, it's this, 2.0, etc. That's formatting I'll figure out. But let's just start at the top. And of course, having you in here, you do have the first three picks. So we'll just run through them all at once. 1-1, 1-2, and 1-3. I have you taking Bijan Robinson at 1, Bryce Young at 2, CJ Stroud at 3. 3, there's definitely more to talk about there. So let's talk about 1 and 2 first. I don't think that there's anything in the world that can move you off of Bijan Robinson. I said it in my write-up. It's kind of been repeated. I don't think it's a original take or anything, but he's been cemented on your roster for I don't even know how long, because you've had this pick for a while. You've definitely been gearing up to tank for him. So I don't even know if a year is enough. It might be even longer than that. One question I have for you, though, at 1-2, I think you're pretty locked into Bryce. I wouldn't say it's 100%. So I'm just curious, what would it really take to kind of knock you off Bryce at 1-2 and maybe put, say, Stroud or Levis, or I would assume that it would have to be a quarterback at 2. So I don't even know if it's worth getting into the other positions, but what would it kind of take to knock you off of Bryce Young at 1-2?
Yeah, great. I think great point. With 1-1, real quick, I would just say, I mean, Bijan, you're right. Bijan's been on my roster for over 2 years, pretty much. Like, without a doubt, nothing about it. I think there's a small argument to be made that maybe my team's not ready to take advantage of Bijan's prime years. I think it is. I think I'm going to be. I see him being a 5 to 7 year running back, and I think I can, win in that window. So you might say I could trade the 1-1 and try to get a king's ransom, but I'm not interested. Bijan's locked in. No need to discuss 1-1 further. 1-2, if I was going to move the 1-2, and it's something I've considered, I've been very vocal that I want Bryce Young at 1-2. I've got Bryce Young over CJ Stroud. Regardless of landing spot, I like Bryce Young at the 1-2, and I think it's very unlikely I move off the 1-2. If I was going to, it would have to be a quarterback. It would have to be a quarterback, and most likely a top 12 dynasty QB. Like, top 12 dynasty QB, younger, probably going to get a second contract with the same team in a good position with a good coach. And that list is pretty small. So if you're talking top 12, top 10, top 12 dynasty QB, I could go both ways. I don't think I'm going to seek out those offers, but if someone were to approach me and say, hey, here's a running or quarterback in the top 6, you give me 1-2 plus, that's a road I would go down. It's a road I'd consider, depending on what the plus was, whether it was draft capital or a player. And then if it's, a back half of the top 10 QBs in dynasty, I would consider it depending on what I'm getting. I'm kind of at my point where I've allocated all these draft picks, 3 in 2024, 2 in 2025. So a back half dynasty top 10 QB plus draft picks, probably not going to get it done for me. It'd have to be like a wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside, who's got some youth. But really, I don't see it likely that I move off the 1-2 from Bryce Young. I feel pretty solid about that. I'm open to offers, but it would have to be a QB top 10. And then I'd say I'd more consider getting a top 6 guy and then me adding plus on top of the 1-2 than I consider the other way around. But it'd have to be QB and then some.
So there's really nothing, because one thing you said early on was that regardless of landing spot, and it's not even worth throwing out the hypotheticals, but just in the sense of anything that's kind of realistic at all, like whether it's like what if CJ Stroud's the first quarterback off the board?
It wouldn't matter to me.
It wouldn't matter. So it's just you're locked into him. It's either that or you're going to make some blockbuster trade that gets you another top 10 quarterback asset or something like that.
Exactly. Draft capital with these two guys don't really matter to me much. Like where they go in the NFL draft doesn't matter. The combine doesn't matter to me much. I've watched extensive film on both of them from 2022 and 2021. And Bryce is my guy from what I've seen.
Yeah. And before we move on to 1-3, I do want to say something that you had said about Bijan, where talking about that window, and this is something that we had talked about in a group chat where, the point was that I think the number that the tweet had thrown out was saying 75% of people that own the 1-1 are not ready to take on a talent like that. And I had sided with you actually, where I'd said, I think that you're in that 25% or whatever the hell number they put out there. You're on the other side of it just because you are able to, I'd say you have your wide receivers in place, or at least you're in a place where you could make moves to really solidify that. But I think you're good at receiver. That's really not a position we've been looking at for you in this draft ever since you've narrowed it down to these top 3 picks. But also, you do have Deshaun, so you need at least one quarterback, but you could be good at 2. And then, yeah, it comes to the running backs, but you also do have that future draft capital where if you did want to kind of try and, maybe speed things up, you could make those trades and start to fill out your roster more. And even if you had to wait one more year, you still have enough where you could fill out your roster next year. And of course, doing that, and it's something we've talked about a ton, where you do still have to nail the draft picks, right? That's the only difference between the value of a draft pick and then a player, is that at least with a player, you might not have that same upside as a guy, but you at least know what you have. We've seen plenty of guys come in and just flame out immediately and not work out in the pros, but Bijan does not seem like that guy. He's this top tier running back asset. And like you said, he seems like a guy that has that 5 to 7 window. We see all these Dalvin Cooks and Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara playing into their late 20s and being top 5 guys. I would hope that you could figure things out with how your team's constructed now. I'd hope that 5 to 7 years from now, you're at least making the playoffs. So yeah, I think you're definitely a team that's in that minority, even though that's not a true fact, that number that the tweet threw out. But yeah, you're definitely in a position where you could take Bijan on, especially with the guys with these next 2 picks that you have. But yeah, getting to 1-3, that's where things really get interesting, because it seems like Stroud is locked in at that pick. And maybe things change, because maybe we see a scenario in the NFL draft where he falls or Levis shoots up the board and all of a sudden Levis goes 2nd overall or something. And that could really change the narrative around things. But Stroud did a lot to help his stock in that. I forget what the name of the bowl was, but the game against Georgia.
Right.
I think people were kind of down on him because statistically he did take a step back since his sophomore year, where he put up crazy numbers. He was the Heisman favorite going into it this year. And he just had a very, he still put up big numbers, but he had a very boring season. No real highlights. The only real chance for a Heisman moment was against Michigan, where he lost for the 2nd time. But I think he got a lot of good favor back with that performance against Georgia, the number 1 team in the country by far. So I think that reignited the bidding war. And of course, I had put off on the mock draft because Stroud was waiting until the 11th hour when it came to declaring for the draft. And there's a couple other prospects in this coming up, actually, that did the same thing. But you've been a Stroud advocate for a while. I feel like you've maybe taken a little bit of a step back from that. You're definitely very open to trading this pick. 2-part question, I guess. Have there been any preliminary talks about moving 1-3 as we approach the opening of the trade market? And also, what exactly are you looking for with that 1-3? I know that there's a case that you want to make here when it comes to the package that you feel you deserve.
Yeah, I would say off the top, Stroud, my critiques of Stroud, I guess, was that I'm new to watching college football, but I didn't really see him play against much competition in the Big Ten. It wasn't SEC football. It wasn't Bryce Young going against, NFL proven or NFL likely talent. Stroud is great when he goes to his first read in the shotgun and has time to throw. Time to throw, first read, looked great. He's accurate, long ball is deep. It's when things get a little dicey, pocket collapses, that I didn't really see him moving too well in the pocket. He'd take the sack or throw an inaccurate throw it away. I think he kind of proved me wrong in that Georgia game. He showed he can run the ball very well. He showed he can manipulate a pocket against SEC, likely NFL caliber defense. So I think I went with high on Stroud just because I had the pick and I knew I was probably going to end up with him. Then went low on him once I watched the tape, and then the Georgia thing kind of got me back up. So off the top, I would say I've got no issues drafting CJ Stroud at 1-3. No issues drafting CJ Stroud at 1-3. I look a lot at Mikey's team in 2021, where he had Joe Burrow rostered and then had three picks in the draft, where he took Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence 1, and then Justin Fields in the back half of the draft.
And Najee at 3, right?
Right, exactly. So kind of the same thing I'm looking at, taking 1 running back and 2 quarterbacks. The thing that I can't get past, is lingering in the back of my head, is investing 1.3 draft capital into a QB3. Now, Mikey, he had I think it was 1.8 or 1.9 he took Justin Fields in. So that feels like, if I'm taking 1.8 Stroud at 1.8, 1.9, sure, pick him all day. But investing 1.3 into a QB3, it's lingering in the back of my mind. It's lingering in the back of my mind. And that's kind of what's driving me to want to look to what I can get for this 1-3 pick. In terms of what I'm looking for, elite running back, wide receiver asset. And you may say, you've called it out before, me going after wide receiver might be gluttonous. But what the vision was all about, I think I said it early last year, it was all about modeling my team after 2 Pence. And I kind of hate that I just said that for George. And
I'll clip that.
Yeah, clip that. I hate that I said that for George and what's his name, but I see their roster. They have 2 elite quarterbacks, elite wide receivers, and they just cycle out these running backs. It's no secret that running backs turn over the most in Dynasty. They have the shortest lifespan in terms of peak careers. So I don't really want to invest that deeply in a running back. That was never the vision. That said, I'm taking Bijan at 1, so obviously I'm already knee deep there. And if I were to trade 1-3 for another running back, now I'm kind of balls deep in the running backs, which is anti-vision. So the vision has potential to change here. If I'm going to go after a running back, I think it's got to be a top 5, 6, 7-ish guy in dynasty like total. So like I don't know. I mean, I think it's up for debate. The top 5 guys, Bijan's already considered like 1 and 2 before he's taken a snap, but we're talking guys like Brees Hall, Ken Walker, JT, or maybe some later middle guys with something plus. So maybe like a Najee plus, or I mean, I'm just throwing those names out. But if it's going to be a running back, it's going to have to wow me because I'm not really trying to invest in running back that heavily. The thought of having 2 top 5 running backs in dynasty my roster is like attractive, but not what I was looking for. And then it's wide receiver. So if I get an elite wide receiver, someone like CD Lamb or AJ Brown, something like that, that's what I'd be looking for as well. So it's an elite wide receiver running back asset. Personally, I'd like if I'm going to move to 1-3, it's got to be all running back or all players. I'm not interested in acquiring any more picks. I don't want, a RB2, a wide receiver 2, and then like a 2024 first. Not what I'm looking for. I want a player, elite wide receiver running back, and I want it to be a 1-3 for the player straight up trade. That's what I'm looking for. The misconception that I want to get off is if you're going to trade up with me, meaning you have a pick in the back half of the first round or whatever after the 1-3, you're going to move up from you mentioned Jalot squeeze out 1-4 to 1-3, which we'll get to when we get to his pick, but you're going to move up the draft to 1-3. You're not covering the gap between 1-4 and 1-3 or 1-5 and 1-3. It's not like we're trading 2025 picks and you're covering the gap between like a projected early first and a projected second first. We're deep enough into this to know that pick is CJ Stroud, who's going to be a franchise starting quarterback for at least 3 years. And there's a lot of good situations past Houston that Stroud could fall into. So that's kind of just the point I wanted to make, that if you're trading up with me and I'm taking a pick in the back half of the first round or the middle of the first round, you're covering the wide receiver running back I would take in that draft to a starting quarterback in a super flex format that's going to be a starter for 3 years. So maybe people disagree with that, but I don't really know if there's going to be a lot of people willing to pay that price or really what I'm looking for. So I think as of now, CJ Stroud's the 1-3, and I'm totally fine with taking him, but I'm going to shop it far and wide.
Yeah. And do you feel like maybe there's heightened incentive for you to take Stroud now because of how Deshaun Watson's 2022 went? And, it's a rusty year, and I think this was expected by a lot. Maybe I think people probably expected him to kind of shake off that rust and finish the season a little bit stronger than he did. He didn't really show much to inspire too much confidence in him returning to that guy who was literally finishing QB5 year after year. And that's not top 5, literally finishing as the 5th ranked quarterback every year that he's been healthy. And then he came back and he was not moving the ball. He could not really, run that offense and elevate it the way that people expected it. And there was kind of an argument to be made that at the very least, him and Brissett were somewhat interchangeable in what they brought to that offense this past year. And then when it came to winning games. So do you feel like maybe it's worth taking that third quarterback? You're saying he's a QB3, but there is a chance that you might need a stronger QB2 as well if Deshaun's not able to return to that form. And I'm definitely optimistic that he will be able to at least get much better than he was this past year. I think that playing through the end of the season was a lot like, I think that this year was a lot like a really long training camp for him and getting comfortable with the team. I think that now they'll start investing more and building more and more around him now that he's back in the league and he's not having a suspension loom over his head or anything like that. And the cases that I think they're all settled. But yeah, do you feel like that maybe there is some heightened incentive for you to just go after Stroud and get yourself a third quarterback just in case?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say, just from what I said, literally the last pick or last time I was talking, my willingness to trade 1-3, I think shows my confidence in Deshaun. Rough start as expected, but the last 2 games, QB8 in week 17, QB6 in week 18. To me, like I saw him in those 2 games, that showed me enough that I'm confident he can be my QB2 with QB1 upside. So like he's got the contract in Cleveland. He's going to be there for a while. That team is looking like it's turning around. The offensive line's good there. I'm confident enough to have Deshaun as my QB2 with QB1 upside. I think I'm looking for that another guy, that draft picks that's going to turn out to be the Mahomes, Herbert, Hurts. And maybe you could say that's kind of optimistic or looking for the ceiling, but that's kind of what I'm going for. Like I said I'm modeling my team after the 2 pins model, and He's got Herbert and Watson, or Herbert and Mahomes. So like that's kind of what I'm looking for. I think QB. I was looking up QB hit rates in the first round of like the past 15 drafts or something like that, and it's like right around 50%. So it kind of would make sense for me to take Stroud and Young. Hopefully, one pans out, and then kind of look to do what Mikey did. He picked, he had Burrow, took Lawrence, took Fields, and Lawrence and Fields have only elevated their draft stock from when they were drafted. So that's why I got no problem taking them both. I have no problem taking Bryce and Stroud. I think they'll hold their capital, if not raise it. One hits, I keep them, and I trade the other one. So
yeah, and I think that the criticism that Mikey drew was more that he kind of seemed to have his guys when it came to having Burrow and then having Lawrence. And I guess you could say, I think going into that year, Burrow was coming off the torn ACL and everything like that. And sure, Lawrence, he had a less than stellar rookie season, but I think that it was more like, he had Burrow coming back, and then he had Trevor Lawrence, who was like the best quarterback prospect we've seen since Andrew Luck, and then before that since Peyton Manning. For him to just use that 5th pick on Justin Fields when I think he could have taken. Did Jamar go before or after? I know that he could have at least gotten Pitts or ETN or Javonte Williams or all these guys that he could have taken that could have filled out his roster better for where he was.
Yep.
But I guess sometimes we look kind of silly just because Justin Fields did break out like that, and who knows? I mean, we could say that for another episode, what we think of Justin Fields' future and everything. But I think he drew even more criticism with that trade that we always talk about, and trading away for Russ and doing all this stuff. It's like, I think that he didn't necessarily mismanage the QB3 play. I think that it was what he did with that depth that really made it look so much worse. But we'll get to Mikey in a little bit.
Yeah, and end of the day, I need a QB. I'm gonna have 2 top QB or top 3 draft picks available between Bryce and CJ. We're in a super flex dynasty league. I've got no problem taking them both. It's gonna have to be wow me at 1-3 to me to move off of it.
And so when you say though, so you were talking about, or maybe you were saying that about Bryce. You were saying about Bryce Young, right? That you would want like a top 10 quarterback that you'd be getting.
Yeah, I kind of just. I figured we talked about the 1-2 and potentially moving it. So like that was my first thought, but like I said, unlikely. Like I'm pretty. I'd say Bijan's been on my roster for 2 years, and Bryce Young's been on my roster since I traded Jalen Waddle to Nick at the beginning, right after the dispersal draft. So it's unlikely. I'd say the 1-3 is more likely to be moved.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. I feel like after this is where kind of the tier break comes, and I think that maybe there's a little bit of a mini tier, but I think it's a lot more open for interpretation. I think that from here on out, where we're at with the picks, it's going to change so much, especially when we get to the actual NFL draft, because draft capital is going to dictate so much stuff. If one of these other quarterbacks is suddenly a top 5 pick, or if somebody drops, right? I mean, like think about Malik Willis, preseason, pre-draft, everything. He was looking like like the first overall, second overall pick, and then all of a sudden he drops to the 3rd round, and exactly. He's going at the end of the 2nd round in rookie draft. So a lot of things can change. And the NFL draft definitely shows what these NFL teams think of these players more than, what any of our scouting can do. But I think right now, Jahmyr Gibbs, he's been locked in at that 4. I think he's got a little bit looser of a hold on it now. I think that, depending on where he gets drafted, I think he'll still be, early 2nd round, like a lot of these running backs we've seen in prior years. But there could be some QB needy teams. And like I said, if a guy like Levis is a top 5 pick, then that could totally change things. But right now, I have the Most Athletic Suns taking Jahmyr Gibbs at the 4th overall pick. And in my write-up, I pretty much said that I think that they could try and address quarterback here, but I don't think they're gonna, because I know how they operate when it comes to their mentality with running their team. And as soon as they see one good thing out of one of their players, they're just like convinced, like, all right, we're all set. And that was kind of it with Brady, right? They got left holding the bag on Brady, and they really wanted to see if he could elevate his value, right? Tom Brady, greatest quarterback of all time, had just retired, just came back, and they said, well, let's let him play a few weeks. So people, like, for some reason, people thought Brady was bad, and they wanted Brady to like remind everybody who he was. He goes on to have probably the worst fantasy season of his career since like 2005, when he was barely throwing the ball back then. He might retire again, all this stuff. But I think the same thing too is, right, they have Dak, they have Jared Goff, and I think because of that, they feel like they're good at quarterback. And I don't think that that's a bad tandem to have, but there might be an opportunity there where, who knows, right? We've seen Goff look like the guy plenty of times and then suddenly fade into obscurity and not look so great. And, that could be situation, that could be coaching, that could be the talent around him, anything like that. But there is a chance for them to do that, but I think Jahmyr Gibbs just profiles as their guy. He's a big, he gets the Alvin Kamara comparisons. That's their guy. They traded so much to get him. Angelo loves Kamara. They have ETN. Kamara's looking at that suspension next year. They're going to need a running back with Patterson and Connor aging. I think they're going to look to trade them as well this offseason. So I think they're going to go Jahmyr Gibbs here and try and roll the dice again and try and compete. And, you know, as we've seen, lead themselves to like a 8th, 9th place finish. Maybe they could get 7th. Maybe they can start, you know, making a good bid at that 6th overall seed. But I think that this is the play here. What do you think of Jahmyr Gibbs going 4th overall to the Suns if they don't trade up? Because I think that they are a candidate for that, to try and grab that 1-3.
Yeah, I guess addressing the trade up first, like you really push the squeeze out narrative. There's been no talks between the Suns and I about that narrative, but absolutely an idea I've considered and talked about quietly in small circles. I don't really know what they would pay, to be honest. I don't even know what my price would be for them to jump up from 1-4 to 1-3. Looking at their roster, I'm not too interested in a ton of guys, but I think running back makes sense for them. I don't think they're going to trade these picks. I mean, they traded CeeDee Lamb to me for a reason. They're looking to start this little bit of a mini rebuild, I call it. I think they're going to take these 2 picks, not trade them. I think they're going to try to fill the whole CD left and then try to hit on the other guy. Gibbs seems like he's the undisputed RB2 with a tier break below him. So I feel like they're going to go running back. Gibbs feels like the guy. I don't think it's like something you got to overthink. He seems like the RB2, consensus RB2 amongst like pretty much every circle out there. I don't think there's a lot to say. They have a running back hole. You just talked about the guys that are old and aging. They need to move on from. Suns aren't like too quick to make a trade or get crafty, I don't think, in terms of like making moves in the past. I see them taking Gibbs. It seems pretty straightforward to me as of now. I don't really expect. I would even like say like 1-4 seems as locked in as 1-3 for me.
Yeah, and I think that with where they're at, unless they really feel like CJ Stroud is the truth, if they really want to take a quarterback, I think just based off of where we think some of these guys will go, like I think Levis will be a pretty high pick. I think that they'd just be better off taking him at 4 than paying whatever the price is to move up 1 spot. But that's to be debated. That's something that will be decided closer to draft time once we kind of see how everything shakes out. Speaking of Levis, we got I Love My Mom at the 5th overall pick, and I have them taking Levis, the quarterback from Kentucky. Somewhat of a controversial figure when it comes to grading him and how people think he's going to play out. But I think that right now, Wallace is in a position to really start competing soon. He was a pretty competitive team this year, but I think that all the concerns we kind of had with him preseason, where it just came to lacking the overall depth for the whole season, that's kind of what we saw, right? He could beat pretty much any team on any given week, but there were just some weeks when the bye weeks hit, once Breece Hall went down, we kind of saw some cracks in the armor there. But I think that this year, especially with the 2 first rounders that he has, he can start filling out this roster however he wants to do it and really make a go for it. I think that, I mean, just based off of what you said, the cost would be for 1-3, maybe, you did name a couple of his running backs. Maybe he hears that and says, well, you know what, that's a good opportunity for me. I really do want Stroud. But just like I said, for the most athletic Suns, if they really want a quarterback and they like Levis, and I mean, unless I think CJ Stroud is like the man, I think that they can still sit back here. And as I said in my write-up, if I'm Wallace and Levis is sitting there for me at 1-5, and I know we only got that 10-minute shot clock, I would submit that pick immediately, just based off of where I think he's going to go. I think he's going to end up in a decent situation, now just based off of who these quarterback needy teams are. So that's who I would take, because there's a big hole at quarterback, especially if they're QB2 with Zach Wilson. Of course, they just had the huge breakout from Trevor Lawrence. That trade in the offseason is looking genius for him. So if he can get Levis, and if he's in a good spot to really start right away, and just the ceiling that he presents, I think that would be a good pick for them. They're pretty good at running back. They're pretty good at receiver. I think quarterback is a position of need. They do have a later first rounder. They can address one of those positions out if they want to. So Levis is the pick here. What do you think of Levis himself? And then what do you think about what Wallace should do at this pick?
Levis himself, I'm going to compare him to Zach Wilson, not for his measurables, not for his play style, not for his anything other than I think a team's going to fall in love with him, just like the Jets fell in love with Zach Wilson in that draft. This was a guy that, we heard about Wilson. He was okay. Penn State, like, it wasn't like a top guy like we heard in the hype, like, Lawrence and Lance and the rest of those guys in that draft, or even Lance. Like, the 49ers fell in love with Lance. So I expect the team, there's a lot of QB needy teams in the top half of this NFL draft. I expect the team to fall in love with Levis, and I agree. I think he's going to go top 15, call it.
Yeah.
That said, I did contact Nick. I reached out to him. I mean, I talked about wanting a elite running back and wide receiver asset for the 1-3. He's got Brees, Ken Walker, DK, and Waddle. I mean, that's exactly the guys I'm looking for. Young, cornerstone running back, wide receiver, elite assets in Dynasty. He said he wasn't interested very quickly.
Interesting.
So it's early, super early. But for me, like, Nick's a guy who does his research, does his homework. I wouldn't be surprised if he looked at Levis and Richardson, kind of thought the same way we were, that they're gonna, team's gonna fall in love with him, and he could be starting next season. And he feels comfortable with getting one of those guys at the 1-5 or the 1-8. He's got the other pick. So he had no interest in the 1-3, like not even a remote interest in it. So he let me know, but I don't expect him to come back to it. For me, that points to him taking Levis at 1-5. So I think it's a great pick there for him.
Yeah. So I think one quick note, I think maybe, and maybe this is too extreme, but I think worst case scenario for you would be a team taking Levis over Stroud, and then suddenly he, in kind of the consensus rankings, I think that would kind of bring him above Stroud and make him the QB2, just based in, in a lot of fantasy circles. I think that would really hurt maybe the demand for your pick at 1-3. But like you said, you'd be comfortable with taking anybody, whether it's Stroud, or maybe that would be enough to make you a Levis guy over Stroud. But I do think that would probably hurt your leverage a little bit if it's like, well, this is always going to be Stroud. Turns out there's 3 really good quarterbacks here.
Right.
I can just sit back and wait. And, that might require, at least for Wallace and then Jalot, who are right behind you, maybe a team that's further back in the draft would still want to try and move up and get one of those guys. But all right, let's move along. We're a little tight on time here.
Yeah.
So 1-6, this is where I think it really comes up to debate. And this is where I think it could change kind of every mock draft I do. This is where we get into the receivers. So right now, this is kind of me projecting a little bit. This is personally not the pick I would make. I'm not a huge Quentin Johnson guy. But like I said in my write-up, I do think that there's a little legitimate chance that he's the first receiver off the board. He's that athletic freak. He's tall. He's lanky. He can jump through the roof. He's fast for his size, all that stuff. If he tests really well, I do think that there's a chance he is the first receiver off the board. If that does happen, I think that'll drive his demand way up. Personally, I'm not a big fan just based off of his complete no-show. I think he had 1 catch in the national championship. That was enough. I was already not a big fan of his, but that was enough to turn me off completely. But McMorrow, he's wide receiver needy here. I think he's pretty good at quarterback now. I did have a quarterback list as team needs, but Kirk Cousins is always a QB1. Daniel Jones took that big leap with Daboll as his coach.
Danny Dimes looks good.
I think that McMorrow is pretty good at quarterback. So if he wants to try and do something and maybe get a younger guy, maybe if Levis is there for him, maybe he loves Richardson and does that. And then just to prepare for when Kirk, starts to age a little bit, I could see that. But I think that if he wants to keep competing, and I know, or even not, if he wants to go in a rebuild, you can always build around these young receivers. Quentin Johnson, if he is the first receiver off the board, I have him here at 106. I don't think that's too controversial of a take. I think it'll be the first receiver off the board that McMorrow takes. That name can change, but I think this is how he goes. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree completely. He's hurting a wide receiver. He's going to take it. Like, I would love to talk about, I hate the spot for McMorrow. I hate it so much. I would love to talk about him packaging this pick with an aging running back to try to retool or reload, or trade back to take a running back to go behind those guys that are aging. So I do think someone is going to love QJ, but we know McMorrow. We've been down this road before, myself, more than anyone. It's a 99% chance that no draft trade happens. He takes the pick and takes the favorite wide receiver off the board, most likely the one with the highest draft capital. My thing with QJ, just real quick, this is a stolen take I saw in my, a trusted source, but I like it, so I'm going to regurgitate it. Take is that QJ, like, you got to look at the NFL teams drafting wide receivers for NFL reasons, not fantasy reasons. So you look at QJ at a base level, I think he's like 4.3 speed at like 6'10", and the ability to go catch the ball up, like him as an X receiver on the outside, he can stretch the field, almost like forcing NFL defenses to play 2 high safeties. That alone is valuable to NFL teams, but has no value in Dynasty like whatsoever. So I think I got that.
Yeah, I think it's like the Henry Ruggs comparison where, we see all these burners, Henry Ruggs, John Ross,
right.
I forget who else, but all these guys that are setting these records at the combine for the 40. And, I think Henry Ruggs was a guy, especially who did a lot more to stretch the field than you realize because you only view it from a fantasy perspective. So I
Right.
agree with that. I mean, he could be a guy that people take on and say, at the very least, he's a big red zone target. He could
Right.
stretch the field for us when we have a whole field that when we're starting on the 20. And maybe we can develop him into somebody like a DK Metcalf, right? DK Metcalf was very raw coming in. People didn't trust his route running ability, that type of thing. And I don't know if Johnson doesn't necessarily has those same concerns with route running. I'm not too deep into that. I've only really just watched the TCU games because they're all over the TV this year. But yeah, I mean, for him, it's just too much of a project for me. And personally, these next two picks are receivers. I like these two receivers a lot more. But for me, I was trying to maybe mix it up. And like I said, there's a real chance he could be first off the board. And if that's the case, that's who McMorrow's going to take at receiver. But
Agreed.
these next two picks, I think we can talk about together because it's both receivers and both teams we've already discussed. At 7, I have the most athletic Suns taking Jordan Addison. At 8, I have I Love My Mom taking JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba. These are two picks that could also flop. And like I said, these 3 picks in a row could just change together, but these are definitely tiered together, the top 3 receivers, no doubt about it. I don't see anybody sneaking in there with them. So I don't think we have to necessarily talk about the players too much. What do you think about these two teams going receiver? Like I said in my write-up, I think that for both of these teams, this is a pretty ideal draft. If Angelo can get Gibbs and then get the second best receiver off the board, and then if Wallace can get Levis or whatever quarterback he loves, and then also get the third receiver off the board. I think that for both of them, that really starts to fill out the roster and what they need. So what do you think about these two teams taking these two guys?
I like the Suns going wide receiver at 1-7. I think they have to fill the hole that CD left. If you look at it real quick, they're getting Gibbs and JSN or Addison in place of CD, which I still feel like I dominated that trade, but who knows? Those guys could turn into, whoever. So I like the Suns getting wide receiver. Like I said, I don't think them as they're crafty to make day of trades for them in the draft. I like them going running back Gibbs and the wide receiver here, and that's the haul they got for CD. That feels pretty good to me. They're going to try to fill that wide receiver hole and get as close to CD as they can with that guy, and then take the bonus with Gibbs. Nick, I think, is in a different situation. We already talked about how he's filling the hole at quarterback at 1-4, and then he's got elite running backs and wide receivers with Ken, Brees, DK, and Waddle. He just needs to figure out this flex positions. He needs to get more flex guys. Like, he doesn't really have anyone he can start in those flex that really make an impact, especially if he wants to make the playoffs. So I really like the idea of him trading out. I like the idea of him trading out either for a quarterback or maybe just for draft capital down the road. The thing I saw with Nick is he's got 3 middle of the road 2023 seconds. We're going to get to the prospects that weren't mocked in the first round who are going to be available in the second. I like a lot of those guys. He's got 3 of them. I like the idea of him taking 3 23-second flyers, hoping 1 or 2 pans out for his flex positions, and trying to get some value from this 1-8, maybe to move up in the 2024 draft or use it to figure out the QB situation. But I just don't feel like, unless he loves Addison and Jackson Smith and Jigba, I don't think they're going to eclipse Waddle or DK. And sure, a great flex position, but I think I'd rather see him use this pick to fix his quarterback situation with the hole, because he only has Lawrence. So I like to see him use his pick for a quarterback, and then take some flyers in the second round of this draft and maybe get some draft capital next year.
Yeah, and there's also so many running backs where he could go running back here if he wanted to, but personally, I think that Addison and JSN are just levels above some of these, like the running back prospects that are here. And
right.
I like this running back class, but I think that these guys are just kind of in a class of their own. So if he wants to go running back, he could also be in a position to just trade back a couple picks. I mean, there's me there, and I'm not a wide receiver needy team, but I do like these prospects. So if suddenly I love a landing spot there, I could be looking to trade up that 11th overall pick or 10th overall pick just to move up a couple spots, get one of these guys if I really want them. And just tack on, a little extra for tax for him moving back a couple spots. But,
right.
That's just spitballing. That's not necessarily, that's something that I just literally just came up with now. I haven't looked too much into trading, and we'll get to me in 1 second. We can kind of breeze right past this pick. Go Tigers. I think their one and only team need is really running back. So I think that I have them taking Sean Tucker here. That's just personally who I think is the next running back on the list. Again, it's another thing that draft capital can really dictate here, but I like what I saw with him at Syracuse. I think he looks good on tape. I think he really looks the part. Like, he's just jacked. He's got that thick neck. He's got kind of like that same like Brees Hall shaped head, that type of thing. So I like what I see from him there. So I think that whoever it is, it's going to be the next, running back off the board in the NFL draft. that's where Mikey's going to go here. That's where Josh is going to go here, I should say. Anything to add on? I think it's a pretty straightforward pick at 9.
Yeah, I don't know, Mike. I just don't really care.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally see him just trading out. I
Mikey's
don't think
team,
it's
like,
necessarily a pick he needs to make. He does need a running back, but
He's a
maybe he
weasel.
tries and finds that elsewhere. Let's get to the good stuff. We're on the Slow Shirt Kings, 110, 111. So I have myself taking 2 running backs here. I think one of these picks will for sure be a running back. I have David Montgomery, who I'm actually hopeful for going into this year. I'm hoping he goes to a different team. It would be nice if I could get Khalil in Chicago and then David Montgomery somewhere else. I think he's a good candidate to sign somewhere else. I was hoping maybe he'd go to New York, but I think that now after this run that the Giants are on, they're going to really look to lock down Barkley. So those hopes are kind of dead, but I think that he can end up in a good spot. But I got Brian Robinson, David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert, and then, hoping on Pierre Strong or Zamir White to step up. I need a running back for sure. So I'm definitely going to go running back here. If I don't make the pick there, it'll be me trading it to get a running back, whatever. I like Charbonnet. He's a little bit of an older guy. I think he was a 4-year player at UCLA, but he's just an absolute stud. He's shown that he can be a workhorse. He's not like 25 or anything. He's going to be 23 as a rookie. So it's not really a huge concern for me there, even if he just gives me a couple good years or something. But I like Charbonnet. He's definitely my next running back off the board. If he's there and then this draft kind of plays out like this, then I would definitely take him. I also like Tucker too, if he falls to me. I had myself taking Zach Evans at 11. Again, that's just another guy. I think that you could really flip or roll like a 6-sided die or something, and there's 6 guys that could be taken here. That's another thing that draft capital is going to determine. I also don't know if I'm going to go running back here. I don't think the receivers are good enough to be a receiver there. I love Josh Downs, but maybe if I traded back, I'd be more interested in taking him. But I think that if it's not going to be a running back, there is a chance that if Anthony Richardson's there, I like his landing spot. I could be looking to go quarterback just because, Tua obviously had his breakout year, but now there are the concerns with his head and how long he's going to be playing. Mac Jones, I'm optimistic about him. I think that when they bring in Bill O'Brien or hopefully him, but if it's not him, just a new offensive coordinator, make some moves at receiver. I think that we can see, this jump that we've seen a lot of quarterbacks make when teams start to invest in the roster around them. So I'm hopeful for Mac Jones, and I think that they can be my QB1 and QB2 for years to come. But it's not locked in, right? Davis Mills, he's hanging on by a thread with that job in Houston. I think he's definitely locked himself in as at worst career backup that can step in and make these starts. I'm hoping that Gardner Minshew can get a starting job somewhere, even if it's just to start the season. But that's not really what I want out of my QB3. I want something a little more consistent. So if I like the spot that Anthony Richardson ends up in and I see, a really good path to development there, I won't need him to start right away. I can sit back and wait on him to kind of figure things out and do all that. It's definitely a project, a little bit of a risk, but we're also at the end of the first round. I wouldn't be thinking this way if it was 1-6, 1-5, anything like that. But at this pick, I don't necessarily love going Evans or Tank Bigsby or anybody else. If I feel like those are the right spots for them, then I'll definitely go there. But there's definitely a couple directions there. I haven't thought too much about either packaging them or trying to trade up or anything like that. I'm content with where I'm at, but we'll see. What do you think about these 2 picks for me and just kind of the direction that I'd be going with these?
Yeah, even these 2 picks, Mikey's pick and Viber's, like the 4 of you, I think 3 of you need running backs. That's the hole you see on all 3 rosters. And debating Tucker, Charbonnet, Evans, and Bigsby right now is it's way too early, right? 4 or 5 guys.
You can't make that choice.
Now, I obviously I change my rankings every week, but based off what I see, I have it right now: Evans, Tucker, Charbonnet, Bigsby. I like Evans a lot, but again,
he's just a beast. He looks like a beast.
But I'm saying that based off of clips I've seen on Twitter. No, I haven't done a hard deep dive on the tape like I've done other guys, but. Tucker. I forgot to say Tucker. Great tweets, elite tweets. Sean Tucker. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I don't think I've seen his profile.
Oh, you got to see his tweets. Like it's comical. He's like, it's these long ass paragraphs where he's like, pretty happy with my performance today. Ran for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. The team got the dub, and I really grinded in there. I did a great job. Credit to the O line. Go like it's elite tweets. You gotta look at it.
I'm moving him up the draft board.
Yeah, it's a riot. It's a riot. You gotta look at
That's right up my alley. Yep.
I love you getting Evans. I'm a little lower on Charbonnet, but like I said, that's just feel at this point. I don't know who else would really trying to think what you could do with these 2 if you packaged them. Like you said, maybe QB, but I don't really know. Like I feel like it's gonna make sense. If you look at the age of your team, like you're very young. You got wide receivers that had great rookie years that look like they're going to develop further. And I think taking these guys here kind of aligns with the trajectory of the age of your team. That kind of makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I think it makes sense for you rather than like a McMurrow we talked about, him taking a young wide receiver right now when his team's like either ready to compete or rebuild doesn't make a lot of sense for me. But really the trajectory of the age of your team makes sense to take 2 running backs here. And yeah, I like Evans. I like you getting Evans or Tucker, whichever one falls to you. And then whatever you want to do with the 111 feels like, hey, might be worth taking a flyer on Anthony Richardson, depending on where he goes.
Yeah. Yeah, just to breeze through the last 2 picks. So the Vipers, again, I think their only need is at running back. So I just had them taking who I had as the next running back off the board. That's Tank Bigsby. Just another beast, another workhorse potential type back. I don't think there's too much to say about that. Like I said, my write-up, it's a rich getting richer type thing. Maybe they look to go, maybe if Anthony Richardson's there for them, they might look to go him just because of Kyler Murray, the injury. They don't who the hell wants Derek Carr to be their QB3. So, that could be another developmental piece where they can afford to do that. I don't think there's too much to say on the Vipers. I'll just move right on to 113, the compensatory pick. Put that shit on. Team needs every single position. With how this draft's playing out, I have them taking Anthony Richardson. I think that that's a risk that they need to take. Amaral, he clearly is not into this first round, this draft class at all. He had a decent amount of picks and he's traded all of them out. He's traded out of it completely. So he's focusing on 2024. I think he is circling a quarterback in that draft. But at the same time, it's like you got to kind of just take as many shots as you can. It's not like he's going to solve all his problems in this one draft. I don't think there's a can't miss player here that he has to take. I think he can afford to take that gamble on Richardson, the upside that he presents. He could be a Josh Allen type player, could also be a complete flame out that never catches, at all. But at 113, I think that that's a risk he needs to take. What do you think about put that shit on?
Yeah.
Is there much to say? I mean, I just feel like there's so many needs.
I would
it's almost
just like in general on Amaral, like first time we talked to him, he gave me dubs in the late 3rd round of 2020 or 2022. Like that told me right away, like he's a deep cut guy that scouts these players. So I'm going to say I disagree with the fact that he doesn't love the 2023 draft or even like it. I think he does. I think it was more of just a commitment to 2024. You look at 2023, I've locked up these picks for years. Suns and Wallace both have 2 in the top 8. So like, I think he more was just like, hey, like I like this class a lot. I need the players in this draft, but these guys got these picks locked up and I'm not in a position to pay for them. So I'm going to be the first guy to go invest in 2024. We talked about McMurrow making that move, but he never did. Yep. So I kind of think, he definitely loves these guys. I know he does. And like I said, dubs in the 3rd round in 2022, like no one had that. No one had that. As you told me that first time, I was like, all right, this guy knows what he's talking about. Probably likes these guys. I think he was just the first to make the move in 24. But he needs to hit. He needs to hit on a quarterback. He made the Trey Lance trade. I think Trey Lance still starts in 2024 or 2023. I think they invested too much draft capital to not give him a chance. But I mean, right now it looks like Purdy could start and they can move Lance to another team. I don't see if they start Purdy next year, Lance is going to go somewhere else. I do think he's going to get a starting quarterback opportunity, but I don't hate them wasting a 1.13 that they got in a compensatory manner, taking a flyer on a quarterback with a freak profile.
Yeah, I think with Lance, I do think people kind of assume that he played way more games than he did. He played 1 game in a monsoon, and then like halfway through the first quarter, he broke his ankle in the next game. So we really haven't seen him. People try to say like, oh, well, why wasn't Lance making these throws? If everything Purdy has is so easy for him, why wasn't Lance doing it? He truly did not have the opportunity to do that. So I do think that there's maybe too much shade being thrown Lance's way. He really has not gotten a fair shake at it. So he's definitely going to be given an opportunity to get that job back. I do not think he's stepping right back into the job. He will have to earn it back. Fight. But I do not think that Purdy is just like the locked-in starter for next year. Even, I mean, if they win a Super Bowl, that would make it really hard not to.
But then they trade Lance and he gets a
Lance is going to get an opportunity somewhere in the NFL, so there is still hope for that. But put that shit on definitely has a lot of things, a lot of uncertainties, and a lot of loose ends that they need to tie up. And they're committed to 2024, all that stuff. So I think I think they'll figure it out. Amaral, he's a great football mind. I think he's going to figure things out and really start to address everything. But all right, Pete, we can call it at that. I know you got some, what is it, bowling that you got to get to?
Intramural bowling league.
Sounds great.
I got one more. I want one more take. I got one more point to get off.
Fire it off.
I mentioned the 2021 draft a lot in this rundown. The similarities are a little like uncanny for me. So 2021, 4 QBs in the first round, 4 running backs in the first round, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end. Your 2022 mock, same thing, 4 quarterbacks in the first round, 6 running backs in the first round, and then same thing, 3 wide receivers in the first round. So
Yeah.
the difference is we're looking at 2 more running backs in this round and then no tight end because that was Pitts and we don't have a tight end in your first mock.
Yeah.
I think like in that draft 2021, we saw Mac Jones, Amon-Ra, Elijah Moore, and Kadarius Toney drop to the second round. I think those guys are in this draft class. The guys we didn't talk about, I think the headline is Michael Mayer, elite prospect for a tight end. Tight end 1, no doubt, in this draft. Going in the second round feels like a steal. Zay Flowers, Jalen Hyatt, Josh Downs, Hendon Hooker. Like Hendon Hooker could be Mac Jones. Josh Downs, Jalen Hyatt, Zay Flowers, they could be that Amon-Ra or that at least, Elijah Moore, Kadarius Toney. So I think that like when I read this the first time through, I read it a couple times. First time through, I was just like, wow, there's some dudes in the second round who are going to be a steal. And sure, second round picks don't hit too often, but I do think there is that Mac Jones, Amon-Ra in this draft, and someone's going to make out like a bandit in the second round.
Yeah. And I think that those are guys where it's like, if you're taking them, say at like 110, you're like, I don't know. But all of a sudden you're sitting at like 2-2 and you're like, fuck yeah, I'll take one of these guys, So I think it is just a difference in perspective, especially, I mean, and it's funny because you're only moving back like 4 picks, but yeah, definitely seeing that 2 next to that name, you're like, any of those guys, it's like, this is an absolute steal because they could go in the first round,
Exactly.
But all right, Pete. Thank you to Sundog Multimedia. Thank you to Easy Peasy Moving and Service. It is good to get back. The energy is fantastic. We will have this up soon, and I'm sure the people will be ecstatic. So good luck in your bowling, and I will see you. I don't know when we're back on the off-season schedule, so I don't think it's going to be an every week thing.
Need basis.
I think right after the Super Bowl, we're opening up the trade market, so I think that's when things will start to open up. When picks maybe start getting swapped ahead of time, that's when we'll, once the trade market opens, we'll have an episode for sure.
Yeah, we don't shy away from the mic, and we know when to hop on it. So
exactly. All right. Well, let me stop recording.